everyone, welcome back to my knit channel. For those of you that are new here, I am Yakshi. I am basically the brain and heart behind this channel, so I am so excited to have you guys here. So in today's demo we will be learning how to take any image that you desire to convert it into a pattern that you can then go ahead and knit. Now this can be done through fairisle knitting, it can be done through intarsia, it can be done through a single motif, so it's really up to you. The method would pretty much remain the same, okay? So for today's demo, I will be showing you just the single way of doing it, which is using a graph paper, okay? Now I do have another demo coming out shortly, I think it will be next week, and that will basically demonstrate how to do the same process, which is taking an image and converting it into a knit pattern using Photoshop, okay? Now that's the method I personally use for depending on what I'm doing. So if I'm knitting intarsia, then I go ahead and do it on Photoshop, but if I'm doing a fairisle pattern, I do it on graph paper. So it really is up to you, whatever you find easiest for you to do, okay? So today's demo is all about taking that image onto a graph paper and then using that pattern to do e-wrapping with, okay? So we are not going to be doing a fairisle pattern, but I think at some point I will do that video. But for today, I kind of wanted to show you something a little bit different than your usual fairisle pattern. So I do hope you enjoy it. Now do remember, I've got a whole archive of techniques on my YouTube channel. So if you need that creative dose of inspiration to you every single week all for free, just go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me and do share it with your knit friends. Also, I do have a whole archive of patterns and courses on my website, so give that link a little click and have a look. Right then, let's get started. So for this demo, we will just be using some graph paper. Now I've got mine from WH Smith. So in regards to the size of these squares, you do get different sizes. There's one that you get that's a lot smaller than this, and I personally do not like those because it's really hard to see. But then again, you do get ones that are a lot bigger than this, which might be a bit more suitable for this exercise. But I've only got this on hand, so I am going to go ahead and use this, but the concept is the same. Okay, so just grab some graph paper, a ruler and a pencil, and that's all we need. And maybe an image that you'd like to work with, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to box out our pattern. So if you have been knitting fairisle patterns with punch card, you will know that it's got 24 stitch width. The length doesn't really matter, I suppose, because you do get ones that are really long and you can kind of do it to the length you like, but we are just going to stick with the number of needles for this demo, okay? So what I'm going to start by doing is boxing out the pattern, like I said. So on your graph paper, just go down to the bottom end, which is this one here. And we are simply going to mark it out, okay? So each of these boxes here is a stitch going horizontally, and vertical, which is upwards, is your number of rows, okay? So we are going to work in tables of 5. I promise it's not hard. It may sound a bit scary at first because we're working with a lot of numbers, but I honestly think it will be quite easy for you. So start out by marking, okay? So we've got each box that's a stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm just going to number it 5 here, okay? Then that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So number it 10. And then you just do so across that way, okay? So that's 15, 20, and 25. Now, obviously your punch card is 24 stitch wide, like I mentioned. So this is 25 here. So we just need to mark it out just a stitch ahead of that, okay? Just before that. And then I'm going to grab a ruler and simply box it out like that. Just so I know when I plan out my pattern, it's going to sit within this, okay? Now, if you don't set this and if you just go ahead and just draw it out on graph paper, now, obviously, it will not fit your punch card, okay? So this is what we're working with. Now, you can mark it upwards as well, so the same way. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you just go 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and so on. Okay, now again, for this demo we don't really need the whole punch card. I'm only going to be showing you a really small section. Now for this demo, because we are doing e-wrapping, okay, we are using this graph pattern to do e-wrapping, not fairisle, but the rules that I'm working with is fairisle, just so you would then find it easier to use a similar pattern or the same graph paper pattern to convert it into a punch card. Okay, so again, we will only be doing e-wrapping for this. Now what we're going to do is we're simply going to draw out a pattern within this area. Okay, now I am most likely going to stick with something quite simple, so we will maybe just do a little heart. So we'll start off with a heart, keep it quite simple. Now again, I like to maybe just work in halves. Okay, so if you want to identify the center, you can do, but I don't think that matters a lot for this because it's not a fairisle pattern. So I'm simply going to do half a heart like so. Okay, and what we're going to do now is simply step it out. So because we have actually drawn it over, we need to box it out because this is in boxes. Okay, so we're going to simply start with the bottom here and just sort of box the pattern out like this to get it as close as possible to what we need. Just do it like that. Again, it's kind of like a trial and error, I would say, so I wouldn't worry too much if you don't get it looking like what you need. You can erase it and redraw it. Okay, so that's what I've got, and now what I would do is I would simply mirror this on the left hand side. Okay, just so we know it's going to be exactly the same. So we'll just go ahead and box it out in the same manner like we've done on the right side of this heart. So made a little mistake there. So next week I do have a demo coming out to do with Photoshop, okay, to do the same sort of process using Photoshop. I think that is slightly easier just because you can sort of just copy paste it rather than having to do what I'm doing. Make sure you do check that tutorial out because I think, especially if you're a student, you'll find it really helpful. I think I've made a mistake here. It looks a bit weird, maybe not. Okay, let's just keep going. So I'm just going to edit that slightly because this is the center here. I'm going to keep this bottom bit in the center. There we go. All right, that's not looking too bad, I don't think. Okay, so that's the heart we are going to work with. Now, what you can do is you can take this a step further and bring out some colored pens or markers or anything that's colorful, colored pencils, anything, and you can actually just color this in as per your colors. Okay, so say you wanted this heart itself to be in red, you could color that in red, and then you could color the outer section maybe just by one stitch in one row in another color, and then the outer section of that in another color. So then in theory, when you come down to e-wrapping, you're working with 3 colors, and it kind of shows you a pictorial representation of what it will look like. Okay, and it might be easier for you to read it when you're looking at the graph and when you're e-wrapping. Now I am going to keep it like this, okay, but I will use 2 colors when I'm e-wrapping, again just to show you how you can sort of use more than one color, so it's just not one, like a one colored pattern or heart. Okay, so now that's done. Now the other thing you can do to make it easier, it really depends on what kind of learner you are. Okay, if you prefer to look at images and learn, if you prefer to look at videos, or if you're more of someone who likes to write notes. For example, knit one, increase one, wrapping, knit one, increase another. I particularly don't like to work like that. I don't like reading when I'm knitting. I just like to look at just numbers in sight, and then I know what I'm doing, okay? But again, it comes down to how you learn. Everybody is different, so whichever method you like to work with, just work with that. So what we can do in this case, I would basically, because it's quite a straightforward pattern, I might just leave it as it is, okay? But when I come down to, say, this row here, okay, because I have to knit 2 rows upwards from that, and that row is, this is 5, so that's 6, 7, 8. That's row 8, okay? So I'm going to write that down, and then I'm going to write down 2 rows up from that, that's 10. Then that's 11, 12, 13, 14. So I'm going to write down 14. And then I know I'm decreasing the E-wrapping, so I'm going to leave it at that, okay? And then down here, I'm going to write down number 16. Okay, so when I come around to knitting, I will know when I get to row 8, I've got to knit 2 rows before I E-wrap outwards, okay? And then when I get to row 10, I go out, and then I knit upwards to row 14. And then when I come down to 16, I know I've got to start the center area. From there on, I think I will just be good to just look at what the E-wrapping sections look like, where you're going in or you're coming out. So I just like to write down the main numbers for myself. Again, like I said, if you would rather write down each of these numbers and write down notes next to these numbers, if that makes it easy for you, then you should go ahead and do so. So this is like your really basic method of working, and I hope you find this helpful. Now, like I said, if you do find Photoshop a lot easier, even Paint, and I think there are other applications or other apps that mimic like Photoshop. I'm pretty sure I know people that use it, but anyway, you find out which method works best for you. But I would definitely urge you to look at that demo as well to see which method you find better. All right, okay, so we can now move forward to knitting.